We're all prepping for the fall. As you know, that's only 3 weeks away. And the big issue on everyone's mind is how are we going to introduce the students to the course and to all the issues that are relevant when we start an online course, which is prone to so many issues that are different from a regular classroom. And so the past weeks, I'll be focusing on getting materials ready, as many other teachers are. And Eric, I wanted to share with you a video that I made on academic integrity to tell and share with the students about why it matters. And I was kind of curious, what your thoughts are on the video and how I could improve it. So shall we take a look at it?
Sure, Martin. Love to take a look at it. That's a riot. Is that a real cheating company?
No, that's a fake one.
Let's talk about academic integrity. Not because it's a politically correct thing to do, or because it's the pro forma thing to do. I want to talk about academic integrity because it's very risky behavior. It's just not worth the risk in your professional and personal life. I mean, it's stupid. It's dumb.
It's a good intro, Martin. I guess my one comment is, I guess, doing the video in front of a sheriff's van kind of suggests that it's a crime, and that might offend some people. Do you think that's an issue or not?
Well, that's a funny question. It is a crime in a way. It is, All the university regulations are that you're not supposed to do that. And so, yeah, it is a crime. Now, whether it's a crime in the sense of a murder or stealing, I think it is to some extent. I don't want to compare it to a murder, but compared to stealing, yeah, you are.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering whether that's the best visual metaphor. Is it about, is the concern?
Well, the reason why I put it in there was, twofold. One is a serious issue. It's just that it is actually quite dangerous what you're engaging in. It can have really dangerous implications for you. Beyond just getting caught in the classroom. You get caught up in issues that you don't want to get caught up. So the notion of danger is captured by the sheriff and the police and the prisoner van. The other thing is just it's a bit over exaggerated. Maybe I extended it a bit. So it's supposed to be somewhat funny in a way by standing in front of a sheriff's van. But the problem is, nowadays, sometimes people don't take it that way. They don't see it as funny. And I guess you could say it could be perceived as threatening. So how else could we do this, do you think?
Well, there's that aspect. The other aspect that I guess sort of concerns me a bit. By the way, great acting. You're very believable. And that's important, I think, to seem genuine and believable. And I think you are. The major concern I have is with regard to messaging. And I know that a lot of people kind of portray people who care about academic integrity as these sort of law and order types, as the sheriffs, right? Nobody's going to be cheating on my watch. And I think that that's what they do to sometimes disparage people who care about academic integrity as, how dare you cheat? It's not about us. It's actually mostly about the students. And just for me, a better message is, I care about you, you're engaging in risky behavior, as opposed to, I'm the sheriff, I'm going to catch you. So yeah. I think some sort of imagery or visual metaphor identifying things as a risk without the law and order aspect to it might be more persuasive and might, to some extent, inoculate you against the criticism that some students and teachers will have towards the law and order mentality.
Yeah, I agree with that. It also puts you as the instructor as the antagonist versus the student, right?
Absolutely, yes.
And so if you can get to a situation where you start off your academic integrity video about the student behavior, and it's about that behavior, and the risk is inherent in that particular choice to engage in that behavior, and not so much the instructor versus the student, I think that's a better way to start.
Exactly. Some way of positioning it so that the instructor and the student are on the same side, and the instructor cares about the student rather than caring about stopping the student from doing something that might offend them personally.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point, and I take that. I think I would change the video based on that. Your feedback. I agree, because already in the video you already have to at times lay out your own rules in the classroom regarding cheating. So you're already somewhat antagonistic, and now you're reinforcing that by the imagery of the sheriff at the start.
Yeah. I mean, people might find it funny, but even if they find it funny and amusing and it grabs their attention, certainly does that. I think that perhaps not even consciously, but subconsciously, it frames things in an us versus them sort of way.
Yeah, and the framing of the whole thing is key at the first scene, and this is the first scene. So yeah, it needs to be done differently. We need to have a situation that the behavior itself is risky.
That's right.
And that's what we need to focus on in the first scene.
I don't know. So maybe instead of a sheriff's van, maybe a scene in front of a casino or a spinning roulette wheel.
I love the spinning roulette wheel. I think that's a really nice one with the ball, and you don't let it fall yet. It falls, but you don't know where it's going to land, right? And that's the risk. Yeah, you sometimes can get away with it, but it is risk, and it's the behavior. It's you spinning that wheel and not knowing how it's going to end. That's the danger.
Yes. Okay. So let's continue. This is awesome. Great intro. I really want to take this course.
Any work that you submit in this course for evaluation must be your own. And if you use other people's work, you should credit them properly. The assignments have been designed to maximize your learning. And when I grade, it's to reflect what you have learned. So when you teach, you're not learning anything. You're receiving a grade you shouldn't be receiving, and is unfair to the other students. Therefore, I will take action against students who violate UMB's policy on academic integrity.
Do you think that people care about the unfairness to other students?
I don't think they care that much. They're just
Well, I think it varies. Some will care, but some won't. Many won't.
Yeah. I was wondering how to improve this particular part, because I'm going through some sort of formalistic things that I will do. And I'm kind of reading the text, but I don't really know how I would make this better, because it doesn't really captivate.
Well, if you want to follow on the theme that is risky behavior, you could certainly mention how accurate Turnitin is at detecting it.
Yeah.
Right? So it's really being risky in placing a bad bet that plagiarism isn't going to be detected.
Yes.
And in fact, right, we have this contract cheating industry, which exists largely because plagiarism is so easy to detect these days. And that's actually a point that could be made. So all these essay writing companies that promise plagiarism-free essays, that's a response to things like Turnitin and Grammarly that are so effective at detecting plagiarism.
Yeah, so that's a nice way to start off, to say that it can be easily detected, because there's all this software that does that. But then you have to get into the formal rules around plagiarism, just because any instructor would have to discuss those formal rules. So here in the background, you see the official rules at UMB on plagiarism. It's often a requirement that you actually discuss them.
So I'm thinking maybe sort of a formula where you talk about a specific type of academic integrity issue and you explain why it's risky. And then you point people to resources that are available so that they don't have to engage in that, or they don't feel that engaging in such behavior is risky. So you want students to have choices so that they can seek support, so they don't feel that doing things like plagiarism is one of the few options available to them.
Yeah, so you would show the university page just because you have to, but it becomes part of a discussion about a particular type of plagiarism, and you would end up on the university page showing this would be the consequence, and then you don't have to get there. There's many choices. There's a writing help center, there's this center, there's
just about every institution of higher learning will have either something sponsored by their faculty or their department or the library, where they could learn about plagiarism. I think even certainly writing centers provide resources and support for students so they know how to handle things appropriately so they don't commit plagiarism, at least.
Yeah, I really like that idea, because what you're doing is, like in many course outlines, you'll only find the rules about don't do this, don't do X, Y, or Z. But what they don't do is tell you where you can get help. So connecting the don't do this to the what you should be doing, which are the choices that are available to you.
Well, it's not only just don't do it. Don't do it because it's risky.
Yeah, but you have to go through the don't do it because there are these university regulations, right? You have to point to the regulations.
Well, in terms of plagiarism, don't do it because it's very easy to detect.
Yeah, yeah.
And I mean, you shouldn't do it for one bunch of other reasons. But if you're trying to frame it in terms of something that a student who's focused on the immediate demands of their life will understand, don't do it because you're very likely to get caught.
Yeah, I mean, what you basically said, don't do it because it's against the rules. You're likely to get caught, and there's no need to do it because there's other choices for you available to resolve your problem.
My observation is that many people are just rational egoists.
Yeah.
And they're willing to take the risk if the estimated payoff is sufficiently high.
Yeah, so it's a very instrumental kind of decision for them, very rational.
Well, a certain percentage of the population is rational that way. There was a lovely article published on the CBC Calgary website talking about the work of Elinor Ostrom, who did some work on the tragedy of the commons. And they basically argued that there's 4 groups of people. There's the rational egoists who just respond to incentives. And in the context of academic integrity, if there's the belief that you're not going to get caught, or if the punishments are very weak and the potential upside is high, then people are going to engage in that behavior. And I think the estimate was that that corresponds to about 25% of the population at large. And then there's another group who are just people who follow norms. If they're told that it's against the rules, and if they perceive the normative environment to be one where they shouldn't cheat, they're not going to cheat. But the problem is when the 25% who are rational egoists start cheating, that becomes the norm. And then the compliers, the followers, are likely to follow those behavioral norms rather than the norms of the university.
Yeah, that's an important point. You're basically saying that the typical rules that we have at universities, they won't work for the 25% that really only care about the chances of being caught.
That's right.
And then there's a spillover effect to those that do care about norms, but they care about generic norms, not just university ones. What are the others in the class doing?
That's right.
And it changes their behavior as well. So yes, you need to discuss university rules, but it's insufficient to really convince the class not to do it, because you're only speaking to the small minority that does care about rules and that would actually still wash away those rules if there are other norms in the class that they perceive as more persistent.
According to this research, the key group are the rational egoists who need to be presented with an environment where the risks outweigh the benefits.
So it's almost better. I mean, you started off the video saying that about the risky behavior. It's almost better to start off with the story focused not on the rules, but on the risky behavior, on the chances of getting caught, put it that way.
That's right.
Right? That it's bad quality, typically what you get, that there's software that can detect it, and all that kind of stuff. And then rules, yeah, you need to present rules, but then put them later in the video because they are more an afterthought. And they don't really cater to the real question on the student's mind of the 25% group.
You interested in hearing about the other groups?
Yeah.
So the remainder of the population, according to this research, were first the punishers. They're people who just are so outraged by people not following the rules that they almost become vigilantes. And they'll do whatever they can to punish the people who are cheating and abusing the system.
So those are allies of the teachers, you would say. Wow. I heard a bit too much.
I don't know. I think there's a lot of problems with vigilantes. And I don't know whether they're allies of the teachers, because most teachers, including myself, and I know you as well, we're not so concerned about punishing people. We're concerned about creating an appropriate learning environment for students. So in that respect, they're not really allies.
No, that's true. I
right?
mean, they do help us catch it so that we can come up with mechanisms to avoid it next time around. But yeah, our goal is not to punish per se. That's not the focus of the entire exercise.
Yeah, and the last group are just altruists, people who are always doing the right thing no matter what, despite the absence of incentives to do the right thing.
So, I mean, that's great. So we could say for altruists, no need to watch the video.
Yeah, if you're an altruist, go home, grab a coffee, come back next class.
Yeah, enjoy your life.
But for everyone else,
Yeah,
but
please
for
stay and
everyone
watch.
no, I think the key point is that most people are governed by perceptions of immediate risk
Yes.
and making arguments about, long-term risk. They're certainly relevant and they might add to concerns that students have, but the immediate risk associated with getting caught and not benefiting from these sorts of activities is probably necessary, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that would suggest that the first scene you want to start with is probably the thought that they're wondering about whether the instructor of the course will be able to detect it, to catch them. That would be the first one. And typically you would focus on the lousy help that they tend to get from contract cheating websites.
With respect to contract cheating, with respect to many aspects or many activities that would be considered academically dishonest, there's a lot of risk associated with it. So I think probably important to frame things in terms of risk and immediate risk primarily, and then focus more generally. Actually, if I had to create a hierarchy of messaging,
Yeah.
the most important message would be, these are risky behaviors for you personally, and the risk is immediate or in the very near term. And the reason I'm telling you about this is because I care about you and I don't want bad things to happen.
Yeah.
Secondly, personal risk that is more indefinite. Things like, as I'm sure we'll talk about later, getting blackmailed later in life, being committed to working in a field where you're not competent, and quite likely a field that you hate, that you have no aptitude for. That's also risk, but that's sort of a longer term risk. And then finally, the third category of messaging would relate to, it's not fair and it disadvantages other people. If the work of Elinor Ostrom is correct, the only people who care about that is that small group of altruists.
Yeah. So where would you put the rules in? Because you would put that in the last one, the longer term one, that it's not fair, or would you put it in the immediate? That because the quality is lousy at times, there is a risk of getting caught, and then there are all these measures that come into play that might affect you.
Yes. So I think it is don't commit academic dishonesty, because there are very short-term consequences that could mess up your life. And then don't commit academic dishonesty, because even if you don't get caught in the short term, you're going to get caught in the long term.
Yeah.
And then finally, don't do it because it's unfair to other people. And in that respect, you're not really talking to the people who might be cheating, because
Yes.
that messaging is likely not to affect them that much. But who it will affect? It will affect the people who just follow norm, and the people and everyone else.
Yeah, it will confirm to them that this is the right thing they're doing, and that it will accentuate a culture that cheating is wrong.
Yes, and
that you should stand up for it.
And it will empower people to talk to their classmates and say, I don't appreciate what you're doing is wrong. And perhaps it will hopefully contribute to an environment where students themselves create a normative environment that doesn't encourage academic dishonesty.
Yeah, it'd be nice I think that voice of students that they feel is unfair is often not heard. I remember you showing me some Reddit threads where you actually do see students discuss how disillusioned and disappointed they are by cheating behavior of fellow students. Sure. And I think to show that might be really nice for some students to actually see, because they don't get to hear that a lot, I think.
I think most students come to university because they want to learn and they want to benefit from it. And the idea that they're attending class with people who are undermining the learning environment and getting ahead and getting better grades by not doing the work is especially troubling for many students.
Yeah, I think that's very true for mature students, like in master programs. They pay top dollar. They really would get upset by that. I think there's sometimes a culture among students coming from high school that sort of cool, or I don't know how to say this, that they don't get as upset and they don't speak up about it as much as a mature student would.
It's a very, very difficult skill to learn, to be able to confront your peers and to, whenever you call somebody out or you criticize somebody, there's a huge element of personal risk associated with it.
Yeah, and I think the more mature student is more self-confident and knows better what they care about, and they're more principled and are willing to stand up for it more than an undergrad student. So I think at the undergrad level, that voice is therefore not heard enough.
Well, no, I'm not sure about that. I think that I sat on a committee at my university and we had undergraduate student representation, and they were very strongly in favor of us doing much more. And also at my school, we have grading norms, which put many students in a very difficult position where they have to manage some incredibly pernicious dissonance.
Yeah, now that you're saying that, if I reflect on the past year, there are students that truly care and speak up about it. It's unfair for me to say that all undergraduates, that's not true.
If I'm in a situation where my grade is dependent upon other people's grades, such as where there's curves or norms, and I believe that a significant portion of my peers are cheating, that puts me in an awful position. Makes me very angry. And I've spoken to students and they've said, this makes me angry that I'm in this position and you guys got to do your job and handle academic integrity. So I'm not put in a position where I either have to cheat, which I don't want to do, or get a bad grade because other people are cheating.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's good to end on the unfairness part of it in the third part, because those students will care about that message. Otherwise, the previous parts will not speak to those students because they're not engaged in cheating anyways.
So the reason you talk about fairness is not to convince the people who are inclined to cheat not to do it, but to let people know that you care about fairness and igniting amongst the students who want to be honest, the sense that this is wrong and not a victimless crime, and that they themselves have some responsibility in managing.
Yeah, that's a really nice way to frame it, because it helps, if you were to redo the video, it helps structure the video and how to sequence the different components.
Yeah, I mean, and just to extend on the last point, a lot of times students work in groups. And what do you do when you're in a situation where you're working with other students who are perhaps engaging in some form of academic dishonesty?
Well, yeah, it's helpful to have articulated what the norm in the class is, because that gives those students who want fairness a speaking point in the group. They can refer to the fact that the teacher or instructor said this or that about how to handle certain things.
And it gives them a sense of safety when they go speak to the instructor.
Yeah.
I know you told me that you care about things being fair, and to let me know if you had any concern. And that provides a safer space for students to come and speak to instructors about their concerns.
Yeah, that's
so
a nice point.
The fairness aspect is directed to people who are disinclined to cheat, I think, rather than those that are inclined to cheat.
Yeah, and it's nice that you're tacking on an invitation to those kind of students to talk to you, the instructor, about any issues where they feel it's not going the right way.
Yeah, and actually, as I'm thinking this through, based upon the pioneering work of Don McCabe, a lot of universities are asking people to make affirmative statements before they write tests that they're not going to cheat. And I'm wondering whether that also falls under the third category of messaging. And the messaging is not so much towards people who might be cheating on the assessments, but towards everyone else. So it will create a situation where perhaps they feel safer telling other students that they don't like the fact that they're cheating, and perhaps more inclined people to be part of the solution rather than just passive.
I think it's very helpful, the framework about the different kinds of students, because certain messages register with certain students, but don't register with others. So indeed, those statements will not register with the real cheater. They'll just keep looking at it as an instrumental question. Will I be better off or worse off by cheating?
Exactly. And that's sort of putting on my business professor hat. That's kind of marketing 101, where you need to understand the distinct needs of your different clients and appeal to them in different ways.
Yeah, and I think we sometimes forget when we talk about academic integrity that we really need to specifically address those different groups.
Yeah.
And I think an important part of the fairness issue and those statements is to emphasize a proper culture. That's what you're really doing continuously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That
so
you are an ally for those students.
Yeah. So you need a message for the rational egoists, the people who will cheat if they do a calculation that suggests that the expected benefits of cheating are greater than the expected pain or suffering from cheating. And there's types of messaging for them. There's also messaging for the large group of people who just generally follow norms.
Yeah, I love that. It really helps, at least in my mind, it helps me sequence how I would talk, because there's a hierarchy between those stakeholders. You first want to address the instrumentalist, the cheater that just makes the calculation. Mm-hmm. That the calculation is not a good calculation, fundamentally, and then you want to end with the fairness one. And so you sequence it by addressing those different stakeholders. And I love that. I think that's a really good way of laying out an introduction to academic integrity. So what do you think about the next section? Let's go to the next one. Let's discuss some examples of dishonesty and how you could just make sure you don't engage in them. Plagiarism refers to you acting as though the work you're showing is your own, when in fact you've based it on other people's work. You haven't cited and you haven't referenced them. And often it's really sad because it's very easy to cite or reference. So this wiki page was put together by a whole bunch of people over the world who went through his thesis and figured out which fragments were taken from other people's work without proper citation, without any references. Now, if you look at the visual, you'll see parts in blue. The parts in blue are irrelevant because those are things like the table of contents, so we can disregard that. So we're left with three other colors. The stuff in black is copied straight from a single source. So if you look at page 200, you see a massive block of black, all taken integrally from somewhere else. Thank you, no thank you, no citations, no reference. The stuff in red, that's taken from multiple sources. So he would take bits and pieces, stick them together, and represent them as his own. Again, no citations, no reference. Now, what's his own stuff? That's the stuff in white. Look carefully because it's very thin strips of white, very hard to find. Most of the stuff was plagiarized. You don't want to do this. This came at a massive cost to him. He got his PhD in 2007 from the University of Beirut. It was taken away from him after the fact. He was German defense minister. He had to step down. And his reputation now, he's known as Mr. Cut and Paste.
That was great, because that was a real life example.
Yeah, the only thing I forgot to do, or in the cutting we need to modify, is we actually didn't mention the name of the particular person who did this. And I personally thought it opens boring by just talking about plagiarism is. Like most people know what plagiarism is. So it might be better just to dive into the example straight away.
Yes, but there's the emphasis on again, why it's risky behavior.
Yeah, the cost to this person. It must have been devastating for him.
Oh, it had to be devastating. Imagine all the work that you did to ascend to the position that he did and the reputation that he had, and it all went poof.
Yeah, shattered. And people will be laughing at him when they see him on the street. I mean, it is just horrible.
Yeah. I mean, imagine being referred to as Mr. Copy and Paste.
Yeah, and PhDs are not a one-year exercise. That typically is years of work, just for nothing. Yeah, horrendous. So, I mean, this would typically speak to the risk part, right? Where everything is digitally available. You have a whole bunch of people that can track anything you did in the past. It's being actively watched. There's AI that they can let loose on the work that you did. even if you don't get caught now, it's still there. And years down the road, you can be busted.
Yeah. And the applications to business are clear because there's a lot of organizations, there's a lot of professions where you need to be accredited, and the accreditation could be revoked and you could lose your career, such as in the field of accountancy or financial planning.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that would be
Or
disastrous.
anywhere where you have a fiduciary responsibility for others.
Yeah. No, it's horrible.
I know this guy in the picture.
You do? Which one? There's two. Well, there's three. You know one of them.
I don't know him personally,
Yeah.
but as you know, I live in Vancouver. The Canadian businessman that's referred to in this article was well known as a local philanthropist, and now he's well known as somebody who paid to get his kids into U.S. schools.
Yeah. I mean, that is sad for the guy, you know, when he's done so much good all his life, to have it just smeared by a single action, just gone down the drain.
He had his Order of Canada revoked.
No kidding.
So
I didn't know that. Wow.
So the title, or the term Canadian businessman, is actually a little bit of a misnomer. He was known as a philanthropist. The UBC, University of British Columbia football field was named after him.
Is it still named after him?
No, it's no longer named after him.
Oh, wow.
So the consequences of him paying to cheat his kids into universities in the US was very, very significant and really undermined a lot of work. He was a former professional football player in Canada.
Oh, he was?
Yes.
Yeah. I didn't know that history. That's very intriguing. So the cost is much higher than what the article itself is just talking about.
Absolutely.
Wow.
His reputation was shattered. Imagine doing so much work to be given the Order of Canada and then to have it revoked.
Oh, that you'd rather not have had it at all in the first place, then.
To give someone else your login credentials to take an online course for you. That is incredibly risky and really exposes you to a lot of trouble. Here's a case in the PEI newspaper, The Guardian, about a U.S. matter. And in this case, it's a Canadian businessman who paid somebody to take the SAT for his two sons. He had to go to jail for 90 days. It also talks about the case of a lady, her name is Karen Littlefield. She paid somebody to take the entire course for her son. She had to go to jail for 5 weeks. Now, both of them have criminal records. You don't want that to happen to you. Never do that. It's very dangerous. They can go in, they can access all your courses. They may even be able to access financial data at the university. It's a very dumb thing to do. Really stay away from that. Don't get into that. You don't need to do that. You're better than that. You really want to do all the work yourself. That's the way you learn. Don't go to sites like Chegg or Course Hero where you can get instantaneous answers to any question. Don't do that. You're exposing yourself. Never upload any materials from class to those kind of sites, or to Facebook, or to WhatsApp, or to a Discord server. It's prohibited. You're sharing intellectual property that does not belong to you and can get you in big trouble. Just don't do it.
Hey, Martin.
Yeah.
I think that the messaging here can be strengthened somewhat.
Okay, it'd be interesting to hear.
Firstly, it's kind of interesting. Through my emails, I get questions that are asked and answered on Quora. Do you know that website?
No, yes, I do actually, yes.
I guess because of some of my activities related to academic integrity, I got some academic integrity questions and answers that flow through my email box. And often people are asking, do teachers know when you download answers from Chegg?
Unbelievable.
Will universities disclose information? Will these note-sharing sites disclose information to universities? And students don't know that the answer is affirmative, yes. So when you're talking about note-sharing sites, I think one of the things you should point out is that there's nothing to stop instructors or university officials from signing up to these same websites. They don't discriminate. They're happy to take my subscription money or your subscription money or some integrity officer's subscription money, and we have access to exactly the same information that they have. And also the academic integrity policies of some of these sites like Chegg and Course Hero. Chegg in particular has a page that says we cooperate with academic integrity investigations from the university.
Yeah, and yeah, it'd be nice if there was a news item that actually showed that they actually did, because some students may think that that's just PR and that they won't actually do that.
Well, I actually have a bunch of examples from basically on Reddit. A lot of people are discussing this on Reddit. Some students are very outraged that Chegg would actually cooperate with academic integrity investigations. And there's actually links to news stories.
Oh,
there's a high profile scandal going on in the chemistry department at BU, Boston University.
Yeah, that would be great to include, because I think that a lot of students think that you know, those are just PR statements.
Absolutely not. It's not just PR. You can show them the academic integrity policy of Chegg, and it's very clear in black and white. You can also show them examples of how it's being followed and how it's being enforced across multiple universities. Right? This isn't uncommon that students are caught using Chegg. No. In fact, it's so incredibly easy. We did a video on Course Hero, and you can see the answers were tagged to specific courses. So there's nothing to stop me as an instructor just going on there and checking to see what's been posted to my class.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great one to do.
Right?
Yeah.
And if students know that you know about these sites and you have accounts at these sites, then it certainly lets them know that it's going to be risky to engage in those sorts of activities.
I think those are really good additions to it. I think it makes it, yeah, I'm 100% going to add that stuff. I think it's really good because it speaks to some misunderstandings that I think students have about these sites, not just in terms of the quality, but also in terms of the chances of them getting caught, because these sites will cooperate with universities.
And you think these sites are there to help students? They're not there to help students. They'll take money from whoever, you know, is willing to pay for it.
Yeah.
And universities and instructors quite often have accounts at these same websites. And there's actually, it's even riskier, because a lot of times instructors use their accounts to post wrong answers.
Yeah, that's and not just wrong, but ways for them to actually catch students because they'll recognize the answer.
Absolutely. In fact, there was a case where a professor asked a TA a month ahead of time to post a question and an answer that they knew was going to be on the final exam.
No kidding. Wow.
And there was a slight error in there that was subtle.
Yeah.
There's another situation where an instructor posted an answer to a question that had no possible solution. And the only way somebody could get a possible solution was by downloading it off a note sharing site.
Holy macaroni. Yeah, I think that's great because it speaks to the first group, which is risky because you can get caught. And you want to show actual examples of this kind of students getting caught. Not because it's enjoyable to see that, but because it is not just a statement. Because often they'll think, oh, they're just saying that you can get caught, but you won't actually get caught. No, it does actually happen.
Absolutely, it happens. And if instructors let their students know ahead of time, I'm going to be keeping an eye on these sites.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't even have to say it explicitly. It'll be clear because you know these sites.
Yes.
Yeah, it's implied.
And that actually addresses the concerns that many people have about talking about these sites as a possible way of encouraging students to use them.
Yeah, I know, because you're showing them the way.
But in fact, what you're telling them is, I know about these sites. I don't think that many students don't know about Chegg and Course Hero and some of the other sites that are less gray with respect to academic integrity.
I agree with you, because if you go to them, you can see all the courses listed. You can see that there's a massive amount of students using them, first of all. Second, if you go anywhere, these sites pop up automatically. So it's not that they need you to show them the way. They already know this way. You just want to show them it's the wrong way.
It's just a very risky way, and would be better if it were more generic rather than specific, because you don't want it to be, you don't want a student to take away from it that Eric, you're in Eric's class or you're in Martin's class and they have a Chegg account, so don't use Chegg in their class. You hopefully want the message to be more generic, that many instructors have access to this. Many instructors and university officials have access to these sites.
Yeah, which is why I think when you mentioned the various sites like Boston University, showing various examples of students getting caught, shows them that it's a widespread phenomena of students catching students, right? Yeah. Not in just your course.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. You want to make them understand that this is not, you are not an exception.
No, so in the hierarchy of dumb ways to cheat, if you don't want to get caught, downloading answers off of a site like Chegg or Course Hero is right near the top of the list. Right up there with classic plagiarism. If you don't want to get caught cheating, the worst ways to cheat would be to download answers from Chegg or Course Hero or sites like that, or to plagiarize in an environment where a university is using Turnitin.
Yeah, totally agree.
So maybe we're directing them to more difficult to detect forms of cheating.
Well, that would happen naturally anyway, so it's not that we're directing them. You're exposing yourself again. Now, why am I saying this all to you? It's because I care about you. I don't want you to get into trouble. There is a very nice documentary on the BBC, I'll post a link below, that talks about a student getting blackmailed. He had someone else write his essay. Once the essay was written, they had a record of him because everything on the web is digital. They had all the email communication. They know he would be expelled from school if he didn't pay up, and that's what they did. They kept on asking him for further payments, and when he didn't, they exposed him to school, and he got expelled. You don't want to have this to happen to you. They hold leverage over you, they can blackmail you, and you can be in major trouble. Just stay away from it. You're better than this. You're good. You came here for a reason. You came here to learn.
That's really good. And I think you'll find that video clip on my contract cheating wiki.
What is your wiki?
Oh, I'll post a link in the video. It's a link of resources related to contract cheating.
I've seen it, but I think others, would be interested in being able to take a look at it.
I'll post a link. So there's 2 points I'd like to make with regard to blackmail. It's not theoretical, and it's just not a video produced by the BBC dealing with a case in the UK. It happens all the time. It happens at my school. I've heard situations where instructors get emails from third parties saying this student cheated and I'm going to turn them in because they didn't pay the bill.
Wow.
And they've been sent all the documentation. So the student is dead to rights as a consequence.
Yeah.
And it happens. And I know from my own professional environment, it's happened at my university.
Yeah, because these things you don't often hear about because people are ashamed and embarrassed that it happened to them. And the university is not going to advertise this either because it's about a particular person and the consequences are dire for that person. But it's good to hear that it's not just a BBC screening. It happens at your place, for example.
But understand, you could be blackmailed for money, but you could be blackmailed for compliance. Because if you're on the hook with one of these companies and they already have all your documentation, they have you dead to rights. Not only can they blackmail you now, but they could blackmail you in the future, but they could also blackmail you as a way of exerting influence on you.
Yeah. Yeah, you could be in a position somewhere where they need you to do something, a favor for them. Like somebody.
Like recruit other students.
Yeah. Yeah, for example.
Or steal an exam.
Yeah, or upload materials.
Absolutely. It's very risky behavior. So that's really one of the primary risks associated with engaging with contract cheating companies. The idea that you're paying somebody to be owned by them, which is kind of an absurd idea, right?
Yeah.
But once you've bought their services and they have all this documentary evidence, then they own you. Probably the same way Vladimir Putin owns Donald Trump.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I think it's good to add those extra things to really dig a bit deeper and not make them think it just happened in the UK far away. It happens here in Canada, and discuss those various ways in which they can be blackmailed. It's not just money, it's all these other forms as well.
And it could be now, it could be tomorrow, it could be when you have an order of Canada.
Yeah, that's right. It'd be great if we had a press release, because now it's a lot of hearsay, right? Or not hearsay. We actually know from colleagues that this happens, but we don't have a news story. We don't have other videos, other examples of this sort of a situation, other than the BBC one and the one in Australia.
Well, the other thing that I'll point out is that surprisingly, there's evidence that suggests that students aren't aware of this risk.
Oh, yeah. Actually, now that you say that, I don't think students are thinking about that. They're so stressed out about a particular assignment that they don't even consider it. They're just going to pay the bill, get their work, and don't think about what else could happen to them.
There's a peer-reviewed paper that was published that looked at the effects of instructors just letting people know about the possibility of being blackmailed on their likelihood of engaging with a third party to help them contract cheat. Here's the article I was talking about, a peer-reviewed article published in Studies in Higher Education by York et al. And you can see that many students who participated in this experiment were influenced simply by the prompt by the instructor telling them that blackmail was a possibility.
Yeah. 90% claim not to have been aware of the risk.
Yes.
Wow. So it's really important for us in an introductory video on academic integrity to point out this issue, because a lot of students won't know.
Absolutely. They also showed that it influenced their decision.
Yeah. It reduced the number of students willing to cheat by half.
Yes.
Yeah, of course. I mean, who would voluntarily want to expose themselves to blackmail? It's almost surprising that the 90% that knew that there's still a half that would still want to expose themselves. It's kind of strange.
So instructors can have an effect on contract cheating simply by letting people know that they might be blackmailed, which I think should also be thought of as our responsibility as instructors who care about our students, because the issue extends beyond the classroom. I care about students not cheating because they're running the risk of it messing up their life later in life, having nothing to do with my class.
Yeah.
So I need to create a safe environment for these students so they don't do something that will come back to haunt them later on in life. Maybe.
Yeah, the consequences can far outreach the actual cheating that they did.
Yes.
Yeah, I totally agree. This is a very big responsibility that we have, and therefore it should be incorporated.
What's interesting to me is almost 90% claim not to be aware of the risk of blackmail.
Now, that could be because they may theoretically know that there could be blackmail, but they don't think they will be vulnerable to it.
That's not what's stated.
No, but maybe that's what they're thinking. I don't know.
Maybe that's what they're thinking, and perhaps that also reflects a lot of the messaging on these websites saying, perfectly safe, you'll never get caught.
Yeah, because they may think they'll put bogus names and that kind of stuff, but they're still paying. There's a financial trail.
Yes.
Those things don't go away. They're tied to you as an individual. So maybe you're Mr. Anonymous online with your name, and you don't have your name posted on the materials you uploaded, but the financial transaction is there.
Yeah. So, wow, 90% of students don't even think that they might get blackmailed. That's kind of really concerning.
Yeah, very concerning.
Well, maybe not. Maybe it's just a function of young people not considering the future consequences of their action. I'm sure I did lots of stuff when I was 18 or 20 that was very risky, and I didn't perceive it to be risky.
Well, that's the sad part. These are, they're no longer teenagers in many cases, but they were just teenagers. It's a time of their life when you make mistakes, and you learn because you make mistakes. And we want to avoid them making these kind of mistakes that they can never get rid of.
All right. So I think we're almost at the end of your video. I could see by the timestamp. So let's go back and finish watching the video.
Sounds good.
Can you never ask for help? Of course you can. The difference is that it's okay to ask for help that explains concepts. That way you learn by yourself. But when the help is just giving you an answer, that is cheating. One last thing.
There you are,
Please
Mr. Law and Order
understand,
again.
if you use other people's help to cheat, you're exposing yourself to blackmail. There's a digital record of everything you did. They can expose you anytime in your life. It can cost you your degree, your career, even after you've graduated. So don't do it. So don't do it.
I didn't think
Now,
he
Martin, that was a little creepy.
I didn't intend for him to put that in. That was just me on when we were recording.
It's not to get help from contract cheating companies, but to ask your professor. That's why I'm here. I'm here to help you. I want you to learn. So feel free to ask me for help.
Very strong ending. I think that's the great message.
Yeah, all instructors care about students. That's the most important thing, and that's why we talk about academic integrity.
Well, it's interesting that students don't think that instructors care about them.
Yeah, I don't know why that is. I mean, you know, the job would be very dissatisfying if we couldn't see students flourish, right? If we didn't care about students, then the job would be horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
I think a lot of it comes from being in large classes where instructors and students don't get to know each other very much.
Yeah, the big size classes, the 600 class size, it's very hard to establish personal relationships in those classes.
I think also quite often people don't always distinguish between caring for somebody and doing what the other person wants them to do. And as instructors, quite often we have to do things that aren't particularly popular because we actually care about our students.
Yeah, it's like a parent in a way. You know, if you're a good parent, sometimes you're not Mr. Nice Guy, and that sounds a bit bad, but you put down certain norms and standards because you want to challenge your kids, you know. And I don't think it's really that different from students. It's the same thing. You want students to propel and excel and really push themselves forward, and that just sometimes means being very clear what has to be delivered and what the challenge is.
Well, I mean,
and that doesn't always make you nice.
Well, it's even more basic than that. We need to give appropriate feedback to our students, right? And sometimes the feedback is not what students want to hear. Everybody wants to hear, fantastic, you did a great job, A+. But in reality, only a minority of our students are going to probably deserve that sort of feedback. The feedback that people need to hear is accurate feedback about their performance and suggestions about how to improve it.
That's how you learn.
Well, we're living in a world these days where confirmation bias is an incredibly serious problem because of how people get information outside of school through their social network, and where companies and organizations and politicians tailor messages to particular groups of people. So people are used to hearing things that they want to hear and that they expect to hear. In a university classroom, I think particularly a university classroom where we want students to develop into better critical thinkers and better citizens, we need them to reflect both on their strengths and their weaknesses and how to improve. And all that is short-circuited by the lack of academic integrity, because if instructors don't know what students know and what they think, because they're using some sort of third-party help or committing some other form of academic dishonesty, then it's very difficult for educators to provide appropriate feedback. And the feedback loop just becomes one that's consistent with pre-existing beliefs, and confirmation bias becomes a big problem. That was a really good video, and it certainly gave me a lot of stuff to think about. As a project, maybe you and I should think about putting together a video that would be more generic, not just for your purposes at UNB, but something that educators can show their students in a variety of different settings.
Oh, I think that would be a great idea, because it would put everything together we've been talking about.
And as an additional set of inputs to that, I'd like to share with you some examples of some other videos that teachers have made to talk to students about academic
great.
integrity. And
that's great, because you know why? Because you get caught up in your own line of thinking. So it's really nice to see what other ways you could approach this topic.
Yeah. So give me a second and I'll cue them up. Neither are particularly long. Okay, so Martin, here's the first set of clips. It comes from Heimler's History, and it's an educator by the name of Steve Heimler who produced a tongue-in-cheek, maybe even sarcastic video dealing with academic integrity, and in particular cheating and plagiarism. And in it, he takes the tack of encouraging students to engage in more cheating and more plagiarism. And again, of course, this is very much tongue-in-cheek. Some of the points here are quite salient.
Many students say that they cheat and plagiarize because of parental pressure. Their parents expect certain achievements from them, and if they didn't cheat, then they would never get the kind of grades they needed to keep their parents happy. So the first reason I would give you for cheating and plagiarizing more is because if you do, then your parents will never have to know the real you. Maybe the real you is actually a C student who is not capable of A's, and you happen to have all these other passions and desires. And the good news is, if you go ahead and download papers from the internet or copy your friend's homework and receive grades that you never deserved, then with all that energy that you use to cheat and falsify your answers, there's none left over for all of those other desires and passions within you to grow and flourish, and that way they can go ahead and die, and nobody really has to know the real you.
What do you think of that, Martin?
I think that's very nice. It's kind of nice at the end, that the last point there, nobody knows the real you. It's yeah.
Well, I mean, it suggests that if you're cheating, then perhaps you're the one most responsible for your own alienation.
Yeah, exactly. Why complain when you're the one doing? The other thing I found very interesting was that pointed out that students externalize why they cheat. They're not the ones wanting to cheat. It's their parents. They blame it on their parents. Whether or not the parents are actually pushing them to cheat, but they externalize. I'm not the problem. Someone else is the problem.
So let's continue.
Students say that they cheat because there's too many assignments and there's simply not enough time to complete them all. And that is actually a great reason to cheat, because it means you will never have to take any responsibility for your life at all. You'll never have to learn to manage your time or say no to anything, because there's always somebody else's work that you can rob so that you can have it all. All the people who
How about that? Really good, because it's about the message about you never have to take responsibility, when later in life they will be responsible for stuff. And so this is, I think, a really good message, because it tells the students about the larger implications of cheating.
Well, also it suggests that students need to be taking responsibility for their own behavior. And quite often, parents and educators and administrators take that responsibility away from them.
Yeah, they should be treated like grown-ups a bit more, which is what he's kind of doing. So
well,
I like the tone that he's taking.
And you know, one of my favorite reads of the past couple of years is a book called The Coddling of the American Mind.
Yeah, I've read that too. It's a really nice book. Yeah, love it.
And the subtitle of that book is How Bad Ideas and Good Intentions Are Setting Up a Generation for Failure. One of the major theses of the book is that we're taking responsibility away from students in order to protect them. And in fact, we're doing a lot of damage to them.
Well, what's so nice about this is he's not lecturing the students like I did in my video on what you shouldn't do. He's giving them all the responsibility, right? Which forces a student to think, is this really what I want? So in a way, that's a very nice approach.
Yeah, and in the book, they actually argue that we are creating people who are anxious and prone to clinical depression, because by taking responsibility away from them, we're treating them as if they're helpless and incapable of solving their own problem. And those are hallmarks of clinical depression.
Yeah. Yeah. So enforcing standards and challenging students and pushing them, according to that book, is something that is not just difficult for students, but actually sets them up for success. Right?
Absolutely. And also the idea that they need to be active participants in their life, not passengers.
Yes. Yeah. So that's the nice thing about this approach, is by sort of overdoing it, and putting all the onus on the student to really go out of their way to cheat, the student is really forced into the position of thinking through, okay, it's now my responsibility. What do I do? Do I listen to this person? Yes or no? Where do I take my choice?
And in an effort to sort of support students, there's a lot of people around universities who, through the best of intentions, take responsibility for learning away from students, or much of the responsibility for learning away from students, much of the responsibility for acting with integrity also away from students. Like, for instance, I believe in authentic assessments, and I know that you're a strong proponent of authentic assessments as well. But for example, the argument that some people make that the reason why students cheat is because assignments are inauthentic.
Yeah.
Well, even in a situation where you don't see the relevance or the meaning of an assignment, you still should be acting with integrity.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is ridiculous, that we are starting to excuse behavior because it is not exactly what the students want. There's many things we all don't want in life, but sometimes you just have to do them, and you still need to have integrity when you do them. So yeah, I agree with you that just giving assignments because then the student would be more intrinsically motivated and less inclined to cheat, it shouldn't matter. You are the educator. The student should assume that you are trying to help them in the best way possible and giving them exercise that they will learn from. And they may not always see why it's a good learning experience, and they therefore may not be intrinsically motivated. Doesn't matter. They still should take that assignment, assume it's going to help them, and treat it with integrity.
Absolutely. Certainly, we have responsibilities as educators to try and make assessments as authentic as possible, and for them to resonate with our students. But
yeah, so I think
that's completely independent of the choice on the part of students to act with integrity or not act with integrity.
Yeah, I completely agree. I see a role for authentic assessments in terms of pedagogy, and it helps students learn in a particular way. So I think there's a lot of value there, but I don't think authentic assessments per se are a solution to integrity. They're independent, as you say, and they're completely separate from each other.
Also, you're infantilizing people, and you're saying it's okay to cheat if you don't think that the assessment has merit or the exercise has merit.
Yeah, although the only thing I would say about that is that, it's aimed at the instructors, but the underlying message is like you say, with the coddling of the American mind, you are not imposing any standards anymore. You say, well, they can't handle it. They will not be able to act properly. They will misbehave. You should change your methods, and that's not right.
Are you familiar with the concept of codependency?
Yes. And in what way would you apply it here?
Well, I think, for instance, many people who have to live with alcoholic spouses blame themselves.
Yeah.
For the addiction of their partners.
Yeah. Yeah, that would apply to instructors and students.
Yes. And that isn't good for either the person taking too much responsibility or the person who's avoiding the responsibility. Certainly, quite often, the alcoholic or the addict is perfectly happy to shirk the responsibility and place it on someone else.
Yeah.
I drink because my spouse doesn't understand me.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, sorry, your decision to drink is yours. Is your own. And if you think that it's not your own, that it's someone else's responsibility, then you're never going to solve your problem, are you?
No, that's right. Yeah, it's the same story with drug addicts, that helping someone in the wrong way is not actually helping.
Yeah. It's interesting. Not only is it not helping, but it's hurting because it's sending the message to people that they're not responsible for their own behavior and that they don't have a sense of self-efficacy and the power to actually make good choices.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because when you hear these interviews with people who had an addiction problem, it always boils down to, even though they may have had help somewhere, it's they made a choice that they had had enough, that they wanted to change the course of action. It wasn't someone else who did something for them and then they became clean. It had to be intrinsically from within, from them taking responsibility for them to get out of their addiction.
Yes. And one of the hallmarks, one of the clinical indicators of depression is a sense of powerlessness, a sense of hopelessness, a sense of lack of control over one's life and one's destiny.
Yeah.
So if we're taking the responsibility away from people for their action, we're wiring people to be depressed.
Yeah.
And we're wiring people to be anxious. And that's actually one of the major arguments in the coddling of the American mind. An excellent read.
Yep. No, loved it. Definitely recommend it. Hey, let's watch the next part of this clip.
Say you shouldn't cheat tell you that when you compromise yourself morally, your humanity diminishes. But here's what I say, why not cheat if you get what you want? I mean, let's be honest, living a life of hard work and discipline and fullness of flourishing is not really all it's cracked up to be. I mean, who wants to be happier and more satisfied and live into the fullness of who they were meant to be? Better instead to cheat and plagiarize as much as possible so that you always have to be paranoid and looking over your shoulder waiting, when am I going to get caught? Okay, because I care about it.
So what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's very nice, because he lays out the right way. You don't want to be happy. You don't want to have the right skill set. I don't know the exact words he had. That was very nice. And then he talks about the risks. So, you don't want to be looking over your shoulder, right? The same stuff we had in our video. You're going to get caught someday. It's going to happen.
How familiar are you with the teaching of Aristotle?
Not extremely familiar. Why don't you summarize it for me?
Well, I mean, I can't summarize Aristotle.
I know.
But his ideas launched this field called virtue ethics, where, ethical behavior is a manifestation of your own personal values and your own personal destiny. So ethics is about following the right path for yourself and doing the right thing on that path. And it's kind of consistent with the message that most people's grandparents or parents gave them, at least in earlier times, where you were expected not to just amass things, but rather to live a good life and to live a moral life and to be a good person.
Yeah, have the right set of values.
And what he's arguing essentially is you're not going to be happy if you're just following the wrong path, and if you're embodying values that fundamentally are inappropriate.
Yeah,
that's the risk. It's actually been brought up many times, and it's a central message also in the popular bestseller, The Subtle Art of Not Giving Not giving an F. I guess I'm not too modest, but to keep this family friendly, I'll just call it The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F, where the idea is that you need to focus on your own values, and it's not about acquiring things, and it's not about results. It's about following the life's journey that was intended for you and doing so with values and principles that are important to you.
Yeah, that's kind of nice, because that's kind of what he's saying there. So
that's exactly what he's saying.
Yeah, without using the word Aristotle, he brings this very important lesson in his video clip.
Yeah. So let's continue.
I'm going to give you a bonus reason for cheating more, and why I think you should begin as early and as young as possible. If you get started young, then you'll have a ton more practice built up for lying, cheating, and stealing later in life. You see, when you finally get the job that you cheated yourself undeservedly into, then you'll be a much more skillful embezzler, and you'll be able to advance much, much higher by swindling others, breaking contracts, and doing whatever other
Hey, Martin.
Yeah. Oh, that's hilarious.
Who comes into the earth and gets born and grows up and young child says, I want to grow up to be the most skillful embezzler.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we all wanted to be a pilot. We wanted to make the world a better place when we were young.
Underhanded things you need to do. Who knows? You could actually be the next Richard Nixon or Bernie Madoff. And I know they got caught and publicly humiliated and their whole careers got washed away, but it's probably because they didn't get started early enough lying and cheating and stealing. But you won't fall into those traps, because if you've watched this video and you take my advice and you get started early enough, then your treachery will know no bounds.
Very good.
Again, there's the link to Aristotle and his notion of virtue ethic, because I don't know many people, perhaps Machiavelli, but aside from Machiavelli, nobody I know thinks that treachery is a noble virtue.
Yeah. No, very nice. Hey, you had another clip, right? That
Yeah, just a second. Okay, so Martin, so here's the next video, and it's just a short clip, and this one went viral on YouTube, and it has several million views.
was there a particular reason that you wanted to show this one to me? What was the reason?
Well, I think it might be self-explanatory. Let's just watch it, and this is actually just a clip of about a minute.
Okay.
Here's why you shouldn't cheat. You guys right now are constructing the person you're going to be for the rest of your life. Human behavior is mostly a matter of habits. People talk as if you make big decisions all the time about what to do, but that's not true. Almost all the time, you just do what you're in the habit of doing. If you get in the habit of cutting corners this early in your career, what are you going to do when you actually get a job and the person next to you isn't doing the same thing you're doing? Okay? You're not going to be able to look over somebody's shoulder, but you are going to be able to find ways to cut corners. And I don't want to fly in an airplane that was programmed by somebody who cheated in this class. Okay? So really, and furthermore, what's the best thing that can come out of cheating? You condemn yourself to a life of doing something you don't know how to do and don't like doing.
That's a very similar message, isn't it?
Yeah. So what is the particular thing you like about this video? What do you think is the compelling message in this video?
I think even if you navigate the minefield of academic dishonesty or lack of integrity through your schooling and your life, prize that meets you at the end of the rainbow is that you get to live a life that you weren't really destined to live, doing work that you're ill-suited for or that you hate.
You won't enjoy the fruits of what you had hoped to get. Yeah, you know what I really like about the video is I think a lot of students disassociate the job that they're going to do later from their behavior now. They think it's just a little thing to catch up on a test, just a little thing, just for the course. They know their stuff, they're good, and they're going to do fine later. And I think that's really powerful here, you know, is that it's an ongoing thing. What you do now is what you're going to do later. It's no difference. It's not going to suddenly stop one day and then you're going to be gone.
And again, you could see that this professor, Brian Harvey, he clearly has empathy for his students and he cares. He cares about the type of people they're going to become. And I think he cares about the students themselves.
Yeah, because he cares about their happiness. He's telling them that you might end up somewhere where you're going to be unhappy. You're going to be miserable because you can't handle it.
Yeah. And that's what happens when you lead an inauthentic life.
Yeah. It's funny, how a classroom is about more than the content you need to know from the textbook. You're making decisions in the class about your own future, your own happiness, the career you're going to take, the kind of work you're going to do.
Well, you're forming patterns and habits that are going to be difficult to unwind and are more likely to be followed, you know, for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And it's not only for other people that you want to act with integrity. I think you want to act with integrity for your own personal reasons.
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing. It's not for outsiders. You know, we talked about fairness. You know, that's an important consideration. But in the end, it's about you, the student. you're going to end up doing something that you're going to be unhappy with, that is not for you, and you should have made a different choice. But because you cheated, you never found out it was the right path for you. And you just wash it away that way.
That being said, I don't think that that's probably the most effective core message, because I think that most people are focused in the near term.
Yes.
But I think it's also important to point out that there are long-term risks as well.
Yeah. So both these videos are somewhat long-term oriented in that sense, right? They allude to higher principles that are at stake. Yeah. But I think you're right that when you make a video for the first group of stakeholders, the ones that are instrumental and make calculations, they have a short-term focus. And these things, they'll listen to them, but they won't really register with them. What will register with them will just be, will I get caught, yes or no? And that's where you got to start.
Okay, so Martin, how should we sum things up? How has this chat contributed to your thinking about academic integrity messaging between you and your students?
I think it's been really helpful. For me, there's two key things that I take away from it. One is to focus less on the things that they're not supposed to do and focus more on risk, their own risk. That's the big one for me. And that refers back to when we talked about the sheriff versus the gambling, right? That's one big message. The second one, which I think is really useful, and it also relates to the other videos. We often, as educators, like to think of higher principles, that principles of fairness and the wrong career paths they take. Those are valid points, but and sometimes just focus on the rules. But the notion of the different types of stakeholders, and not to forget that they will look for different things, and to start off with a student who is just instrumental and focused on calculations. And can he get away with it, yes or no? I think that's, for me, a big one, because it will totally change the way I would sequence the video. So I love that aspect. It makes it clear how you would sequence it. It makes it clear which groups you need to target, starting with the short term on people who make the calculations, then going to the longer term implications of the potential blackmail and that kind of stuff, and then ending with the fairness, which is, again, a very different student population. That gives a capstone to how you would set up your message. I think that's really valuable.
Yeah, I mean, I agree wholeheartedly with what you said.